Javonte Williams and Davian Wicks are the top fantasy sleepers in week 5. We tell you why, plus get into the best DFS plays of the week on today's episode of Locked On Fantasy Football.
You are Locked On Fantasy, your daily NFL fantasy podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into the Locked On Fantasy Football Podcast. I'm one of your co-hosts, Michelle Magdziuk, and when I'm not doing this, I'm a researcher and fantasy analyst with NFL Network.
And I'm your other co-host, Vinnie Iyer. When I'm not doing this, I'm writing about NFL fantasy and betting for sportingnews.com.
Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Place your first $5 bet, and you'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. All right. On today's episode, we're going to go through the sleepers of the week. We're going to go through one player at each position: quarterback, running back, wide receiver, and tight end. And then the rest of the episode, we'll get to the daily fantasy sports segments, right? The PrizePicks picks of the week and our FanDuel lineup. Let's start off with our sleepers, starting at the running back position. Javonte Williams against the Raiders. This is when you're banging the table for, right? Like, I was a little iffy at first to go along with this, but looking into it, seeing what running backs have done to the Raiders this year, allowing a league high 5.4 yards per carry to running backs, and just like they're just eating them apart. And Javonte Williams finally got involved last week. Like, I think he is. I think I agree with you that he's a solid sleeper play this week at running back.
Yeah, and Tyler Badie went down, so that just opens things up where he doesn't have another option, Sean Payton being him, to tempt him into going away from Javonte Williams. I know he's been in the doghouse at times. They've tried to work in Julian McLaughlin as many times as they can, but McLaughlin has been tiny. He can't hold up. Javonte Williams looked good, and I think that was a game that kind of motivated him a little bit, and they needed him. And he kind of was key in that victory to keep the Jets off the field. So if you're winning and something works and you have a key injury, you think you would stick with it this week, and you definitely can run on the Raiders. I think that's what the Broncos want to do in their core here. They have pretty good defense. It's playing really well right now. So running in defense might be their formula right now versus trying to put too much on Bo Nix to throw the ball around. So all things lined up for Javonte Williams. It'd be nice if he got like 3 or 4 catches to go with that and get a little bit more involved that way. And then you'd really have a nice game for him and maybe get a score at some point. But Broncos are at home. They've been killing it on the road the last 2 weeks. They're eager to get back there to Denver. So they'll build on those Buccaneers and Jets performances here, and Williams will take advantage of that.
Yeah, it will be nice if he could get, some receiving yards. Last week, it was only 3 receiving yards. He finally had a good rushing day, only 3 receiving yards. But the 2 weeks prior, he had 48 yards, 29 yards. Like, let's see him get back to that. Now, at wide receiver, our sleeper of the week, there was a lot of choices here. I was in between, like, going with a guy like Josh Downs or even another Bronco, Cortland Sutton. But we were like, okay, we can't do 2 Broncos, right? Because they don't score very many points in general as a team. But one team that scores a ton of points often, as long as Jordan Love is out there, is the Packers. So we've talked about Jayden Reed, how much we loved him in yesterday's show. He's a top-ranked guy. But there's another wide receiver that could have a big game this week, and it's Davian Wicks. The Rams have been just eaten alive by wide receivers this year, besides last week against the Bears. But Juwan Jennings, Marvin Harrison, Jameson Williams, these guys that are deep threats have really destroyed them. And Wicks got 13 targets last week. He played a season high 76% of the snaps. Christian Watson's out. Like, their deep threat is out. That's going to be Wicks's role, I think, now. Got 2 touchdowns last week. I think Wicks is a really solid play. Obviously risky, but also has really high upside in week 5.
Yeah, we talked about how much we love Jayden Reed on the previous show, and I think it's also could be a good game for Josh Jacobs on the ground. But I think what's happening, which is nice with the Packers, we're finally getting some things sorted out with these gaggle of receivers, young, that they have at wideout and tight ends, because we also seen some stuff with Tucker Kraft develop in his favor as well. So when we're looking at this, I mean, their best offense to me is not forcing in Christian Watson and Romeo Doubs in this offense. When they have Jayden Reed and Davian Wicks, these guys keep crushing it. I just don't know why they just don't unleash them. This is our starting lineup. Like, why do we always have to go back to Watson? I think, again, just like we want to go back to Watson, it's that tantalizing upside. But Wicks actually has a production. Every time he's out there, everyone's like, oh, he's so impressive. He all his teammates are like, oh, this guy runs really good routes, and Jordan Love is very happy about him. Well, this is it, right? This is a great matchup. You can do whatever you want in this game with Reed and Wicks. So again, don't sleep on Wicks. He was not just chasing last week's game. He did give us an indication that he could be explosive and have some high upside. So we also want to play a sleeper with upside. And telling you, these guys do have a lot of upside this week. Wicks and Williams, based on their matchup, and the game script should really line up there with Wicks making the big plays, getting the Packers ahead, and then they turn the ball to run again.
Now, quarterback, we talked about this in our rankings, quarterback ranking show on Tuesday, but one of our favorite streaming quarterbacks of the week that's a sleeper, it's Gino Smith against the Giants. He's consistent, right? Quarterback 8, quarterback 8, quarterback 8. Like at 3 of 4 weeks, he had one down week. And that's with only threat. Like he has not thrown multiple touchdowns in a game yet this year. And that can come. I mean, last week he should have thrown 3. There's 2 times that the guy fell down at the inch line. That's just unlucky. More touchdowns are going to come from him. He's leading the league right now in passing attempts and passing yards. Like the touchdowns will end up coming. My biggest concern, though, Vinny, with Geno Smith against the Giants is if Malik Neighbors doesn't play, if that ends up happening, will the Giants be able to put up enough points for Geno Smith to have to throw a lot? I think that would be my biggest worry.
Yeah, I think he has a very high floor this week. His ceiling may be a little bit limited because of that, but he threw a ton there on Monday night. Now, that's not going to happen. They're not going to face an offense that's going to push them to have such high volume. But again, Gino can get it done. He can get 3 scores easily early in the game and step out, and he can also give you some rushing yards there if they're in the lead to pad his numbers. So I do like Gino Smith quite a bit. He's not there quite as a every week play that we saw from 2 years ago where he finished inside the top 12, but he's getting there. Like this offense has the weapons. It's got a lot of good matchups. Again, we want to see the multiple touchdowns. Maybe we finally see that this week to ease the burden off having to have that big volume to come through.
Yeah, he and DK Metcalf have just been on fire.
Yeah.
100 yards in 3 straight games for DK. So just keep chucking it up to DK, Gino, and great things will happen. Now to finish up our sleepers here at tight end, we're going to go with Dalton Schultz against the Bills. Schultz has run 135 routes this season. That's the second most among tight ends. I've been saying I'm expecting low production from Nico Collins. The Bills have allowed just 14 downfield receptions this season on 44 attempts, by the way. They're allowing 31 completion percentage on downfield completions. That's just 10 plus air yards. That ranks first in the NFL. With them being so zone heavy, expect little shorter passes and for Schultz to be more involved in this offense.
Yeah, I mean, the matchup is pretty good. I know last week you'll seem like the Ravens didn't put up a lot of numbers on the Bills, but that's really how you attack them. In the middle of the field, you have to throw there against the Bills. I mean, just the way they are set up here with the way their coverage is, with their zone, we talked about that as well, that C.J. Stroud needs to figure out the zone thing that Michelle says he struggles with, and the zone beater is thrown to the tight end, right? In the middle of the field, you're going to get some wide openings there without Matt Milano. You have also Dodson gone to Seattle. He was a good replacement for Milano. You don't have him anymore either. So this linebacker core is very vulnerable. These corners are pretty good. I mean, even the newer guys, like Christian Benford, has been really good. So again, they're going to be careful about throwing outside. And also Tank Dell has not been doing a lot. So you got to get something on the inside, and you would think that Schultz would be the guy. So again, he's produced whenever he sees the ball, right? Like he's put numbers when C.J. Stroud is throwing to him. He's got to do that a little bit more. I think this is a great week to do that.
Yeah, I would like to see Dalton Schultz more involved, right?
Yeah,
like let's
get him 7 to 8 targets. That'd be great. Like,
yeah, not like, I am enjoying this huge plays to Nico Collins, but let's get Schultz is a good tight end. Let's give him a little bit more involved. Let's get another good viable tight end option for us. But it's not going to be on a weekly basis that we feel good about Schultz, but in this particular matchup with the way I think the offense is going to have to run, I think he's a solid option if you need someone off of waivers this week. We're going to move on to our favorite DFS plays. Now, if you don't play daily fantasy sports, that's okay, right? Because all of these picks we're playing, we're still talking about them as we think they're going to be good fantasy play. So this is still going to help you set your lineup. Don't worry about that. But we're going to get into our picks of the week, and our FanDuel lineups to finish up our Friday show right after a quick break. This show is sponsored by PrizePicks. PrizePicks is the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Unlike other apps on PrizePicks, it's just you against the numbers. All you do is pick more or less on 2 to 6 player stat projections and watch the winnings roll in. You can now win up to 100 times your money on PrizePicks with as little as 4 correct picks. What's also super cool about PrizePicks is that they're the only real money daily fantasy platform with an injury insurance policy, so that your lineups stay in play even if one of your players gets injured. If your player leaves in the first half, it doesn't like ruin your lineup. It just, everyone else still stays in play. Your picks still stay alive. That's huge. Vinny and I will give you 6 of our favorite picks of the week in our upcoming segment. So if you want to get involved and you know, play with us with those picks or pick your own favorites, all you have to do is sign up at PrizePicks today. You just download the PrizePicks app, use code LOCKEDONNFL, and get $50 instantly when you play $5. That's code LOCKEDONNFL on PrizePicks to get $50 instantly when you play. You don't even have to win. Vinny, give me your favorite PrizePicks pick of the week, your top one that you feel the best about.
All right, it's back. It's back. The favorite go-to that I had last year for PrizePicks. I waited a little bit to get some data going in, but into week 5, the team that gives up the most consistent rushing yards to quarterbacks is the Buffalo Bills. Now, they did face Lamar Jackson, so let's keep that in mind here, but Trevor Lawrence, you know, he's okay mobility-wise. But the number on CJ Stroud is so low. It's 9.5 rushing yards. So CJ Stroud, one decent scramble, he's got this for you. So I'm going more than 9.5 rushing yards. They allow the guys to run around a little bit more. We talked about the zone defense. They're going to have maybe their backs turned a little bit. Linebackers a little slow reacting. He takes off and runs. He just needs 1 to 2 runs in this game, and he's giving you 9.5 rushing yards. He's mobile enough. He's not a burner, but he's going to move when he has the opportunity and he sees some open field. So not asking a lot for CJ Stroud. Run a little bit, slide after 10 yards. We're good to go.
I feel like I'm cheating with my PrizePicks pick of the week. Like at least yours is pretty, you know, you're going out on a limb here a little bit because Stroud's not a big rusher, but I like it. Like I do think for him to succeed in this matchup, he's going to have to use his legs, make the defense at least respect him in that area. But mine just feels like an easy square because Jayden Reed is sitting there more than 60.5 receiving yards. In both games that he's played with Jordan Love this year, he's had over 130 receiving yards. Going back to last year, he's had at least 89 receiving yards in each of his last 4 games played with Jordan Love. There's no Christian Watson like we brought up. We brought up already that the Rams defense stinks. Juwan Jennings had 175 yards against them. Marvin Harrison, 130. Jameson Williams, 121. Jayden Reed is that's just way too of a line. So way too low. So 60.5 receiving yards more than. Feel great about that. Book it.
I like it. I mean, we're all in on Jayden Reed this week. I mean, wide receiver rankings, however we want to look at it, DFS, we want Jayden Reed in our lineups as much as possible, and the Rams matchup is why, and that's exactly why my number 2 pick was made here. That's Josh Jacobs. Don't forget about him. Don't forget about the fact that the Rams also not a good run defense. They're really not a good defense, period. And look, it's been rough for Josh Jacobs. He's seen Emmanuel Wilson being shot out of the cannon. He looks faster, even without A.J. Dillon or Marshawn Lloyd. It's been a struggle bus a little bit here for him to really be relied upon as a feature back that we drafted him, borderline RB1. But this week he comes through for you. Play him, make sure he's in your lineup. 65.5 rushing yards is the number there. More. That's the more we're going with on Josh Jacobs. I'm hoping Jayden Reed, Davian Wicks, they get the lead here for Jordan Love. He's throwing all over the field. They go up like 35-0. Here comes Josh Jacobs eating this until it's time to mop up for Emmanuel Wilson. So, again, the numbers are so low, and he has been getting yards. It's just not been the touchdowns or the receptions. And that's why I do like that number, 65.5 more rushing yards there for Josh Jacobs.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I thought he looked solid last week. I did. Emmanuel Wilson, has been stealing some snaps. He also looks good, but Jacobs looks solid. This is a much nicer matchup for him against the Rams, and I do expect the Packers to be able to beat up on the Rams. So I like that as well. Now, Brian Thomas Jr. is a guy I've talked about on our wide receiver ranking show. I really, really like him this week, but his projections at 54.5 receiving yards, and I think that's very, very fair to take the more than. He's had at least 86 receiving yards in 2 of his 4 NFL games. He's only played 4 NFL games, but has 9 targets over the last 2 weeks. And he caught a career high 6 receptions last week. No defense has allowed more deep receiving yards. That's 20 plus air yards than the Colts this season, while Brian Thomas is leading the Jaguars in deep targets, receptions, and receiving yards this season. So I really like him to have more than 54.5 receiving yards. Nico Collins put up 117 against the Colts. George Pickens, 113. Roma Dunze, who's done nothing this year outside of the Colts game, 112. And Brian Thomas Jr. plays in a very similar way to these guys. So love the more than 54.5 receiving yards.
Yeah, and what happened to Gabe Davis? We talked about Gabe Davis.
He does what he always does. He just disappears.
Yeah, he disappears, which has been great for Brian Thomas, and so have the injuries early to Evan Ingram and Christian Kirk coming back from the injuries. So, again, Thomas, we thought they would establish him a little bit more as a first-round pick with Lawrence, and you're seeing that now week in and week out. So that's a very good number to attack Michelle as well, 54.5. Now, my last guy is also at 54.5. That's why I did like that number. And that's why I'm going with more. It's our podcast semi-favorite, or however we want to call it. I say that in jest here. It's Garrett Wilson. But guess what? Garrett Wilson has a low number of 54.5. And the Vikings defense is playing well. But the one thing the Vikings defense is okay doing is giving up a lot of yards. They don't care about the yards. As long as they keep forcing turnovers, it doesn't really matter to them. Like Brian Flores' defense is all about that, right? They just don't care. Oh, you got 300, 400 yards or whatever that Jordan Love piled up easily last week. They don't care because they turned them over in key moments and they won the game. And that's what they're most concerned about. So they actually give up the most receiving yards to opponents. And a lot of it was the damage that Wicks and Reed did last week. I get it. But you have Aaron Rodgers here, a little bit of a Matt LaFleur adjacent offense, if you will, in London going this week. So again, I'm not asking a lot from Wilson. This may not inspire you too much in fantasy. If he gets to 56 yards, we're going to be thrilled about that. But when we look at 54.5 for this purpose on PrizePicks, that's a fine number, and that's why I like playing PrizePicks, because you don't need 100 in the score to win with Garrett Wilson in a week.
Yeah, we don't like him in fantasy. And I don't even know if I like this projection, honestly. Alan Lazard's leading this offense in receiving yards. Like
not anymore.
They're not making this connection. It'll be. Listen, if Davante Adams goes to the Jets, it's going to get real dicey for Garrett Wilson moving forward with fantasy. But it's low enough. He should have more than that. I think I'm staying away from anything Garrett Wilson for the time being, but I understand it. He's plenty able to get this.
We try to be bold here sometimes.
Yeah. Now, I love mine. We like this guy for fantasy this week, Justin Fields. We think he's going to have a good game against the beaten up, injured Cowboys defense. But they have a fun projection this week on PrizePicks. They have Fields at 1.5 pass plus rush plus receiving touchdown, which I thought was just cool that they added the receiving. You never know. We just saw Jared Goff get a receiving touchdown this last week. So just an extra little bonus there. But he's scored 2 touchdowns in each of the last 2 games, or at least 2 touchdowns. He had 2 touchdowns in week 3 against the Chargers, tough defense, 3 touchdowns last week. These quarterbacks have actually been able to get it done against the Cowboys. Derek Carr had 3 total touchdowns in week 2. Lamar, who's much better than Justin Fields, but he put up multiple touchdowns against them. I know the Cowboys held Daniel Jones to 0 touchdowns, but whatever, right? Yeah. And without I call him Mika because that's my dog's name. Micah Parsons is dealing with a high ankle sprain. I highly doubt he plays. DeMarcus Lawrence won't be playing. He's on IR. Like, this defense is really banged up. I think Justin Fields will be able to run on them. And then also hopefully he can get a couple passing touchdowns. One of them to George Pickens, please. Like, let him get in the end zone. But I think Fields will definitely score multiple. Like, maybe it'll just be 2, but I feel pretty good that he'll get in twice.
Yeah, and another thing you mentioned about Derek Carr scoring multiple touchdowns. One was on the ground. Derek Carr can't run. So
Yeah.
that's, I mean, he kind of looks like he can run, but he can't. But Justin Fields, we know, can run. And Lamar also was a big problem for this Cowboys defense, and that was with Parsons in there. So, yeah, good luck, Cowboys. I just do not like the Cowboys' chances this week, offensively, defensively, maybe in fantasy-wise this week. It just could be pretty ugly for the Steelers. So, giddy up on their side at home. We're going to have a lot of fun on Sunday night. So, I love that pick by you, and I love all our picks all the time. They don't always come through, but that's why it's fun to look at PrizePicks and get on the action. We can use any three of those or pick your own or however you want to do it there, but PrizePicks is a lot of fun, so I really urge you to get in on that. So it's FanDuel, and we'll get into our FanDuel lineups here for the main slate, and check that out to close the week as we end this episode of Locked On Fantasy Football. All right. I did talk a lot about this Cowboys Steelers game. Like, just take it. I mean, if you want to even adjust the line, I think the Steelers are going to smash the Cowboys this week. That's what Michelle wants to hear as well. But this is a game that I will be backing, and I think it's feeling good right now. I really like the Steelers side of things. It did help that the Steelers did not look good against the Colts. Well, if you want to get into that action or any of these games this week, and it's week 5, what are you waiting for? It's time to step in and start your season on FanDuel with a big return, America's #1 sportsbook. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can also check out the latest stats, live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets with on Cowboys, Steelers, or any of the other games, or maybe a combination of picks and a parlay, however you want to look at it this week. But you'll also get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. It's always fun to have when you place your first $5 bet. That's only in FanDuel. At FanDuel.com. America's #1 sportsbook. Check it out, FanDuel.com. Get in on the action now. All right, let us close the show by revealing our FanDuel lineups just for the main slate here. So just looking at it, and we kind of think about cash games and tournaments when we're discussing and considering these players. So I'll let Michelle go first here and reveal her quarterback of the week.
How many times do we got to talk about the Rams today? Or not the Rams, the Packers, who are facing the Rams. Apparently one more time, because I'll just let you know right now, I have the stack of the Jordan Love, Jaden Reed, right? Like, if I think they're going to go off this week, Jordan Love's not even close to the highest priced quarterback, and I think he can finish as the highest quarterback this week. And same thing with Jaden Reed. So I have those two as my quarterback wide receiver stack that we always love to have in these lineups.
All right. Well, I'm going to do this because you've already mentioned you have Jaden Reed in a lineup. Shocker. I have Jaden Reed in my lineup as well. Of course. So he's unstacked, though. He's unstacked. I have him at 7,200 is the price, but a really nice price for Jaden Reed based on how high we think he's going to score this week. So you should get a potential of the 3x return, which would be 21.6 points. I think you can definitely get that from Jaden Reed this week. I do have a stack. It's a little bit different. It's Brock Purdy and the OG Jaden Reed, Deebo Samuel Sr. He's at $8,000. So Brock Purdy at 7,700. Deebo week has to happen. He's fully healthy now. I couldn't trust Brandon Ayuk completely. We've tried Ayuk in this lineup, and look, I need to see it to believe it. Last week was a little bit of George Kittle fun week. Now it's time for some Deebo action. 1 week removed from getting back from that injury, so I do like it. So that's my stack there. So if I'm going Purdy Samuels as my stack with Reed as another one of my wide receivers, who's your next wide receiver?
Yeah, my next wide receiver is Brian Thomas Jr. I talked about really liking him on yesterday's show, and then also as my prize pick. So that also makes sense that I would want to throw him in. Only 6,300. So you can get him at a really, really nice price. I think he's going to be a top 20 wide receiver this week. And then I'm going with George Pickens for my third wide receiver. If we like Justin Fields, and yeah, we like him because of his rushing, and we do want him to run, but the only guy that he's connecting with this year, besides some short passes to fry him with, it's George Pickens, and they are connecting, right? And some of these big plays have been called back due to holding or, Pickens being just out of bounds. But like, a big game is going to come between these two where they have multiple touchdowns and over 100 yards. I mean, George Pickens did hit over 100 yards last week. I was shocked by that, but he had 11 targets. Like, I see that happening again. He just needs to get into the end zone to make him like a really good DFS play. But I think he can this week.
So I did say that I have Jim Reed. I do have Deebo Samuel, and you'll be shocked to find out that I also have Brian Thomas Jr. at
Nice.
6,300. So he just was so affordable, and I could fit him in, and I could get Deebo in here, and I could also open it up to spend well on my running backs, which I won in the flex. So I will go ahead and reveal my flex first and build it up to what I have in the real backfield. But I have Ramondre Stevenson at 6,700. I love this pick this week. The game script is not going to get away from the Patriots for a change. They're going to be playing from the head. You saw what Tony Pollard and Tyjae Spears did to this Dolphins front. This is one guy, maybe a little bit of Antonio Gibson, but if they're playing from ahead and they're winning, you'll see a lot of Stevenson in this game. So he's been looking good. It just hasn't quite materialized. The offensive line hasn't helped. The passing game hasn't helped. He's been stuck in a bad offense. But I think this offense looks really good because of facing the Dolphins and Tyler Huntley this week. So I do like Ramondre Stevenson at 6,700. He's in my flex, so I'll save my 2 running backs.
I will say Stevenson is in my running back spot. I really like him this week. It's the first 2 weeks when they made the games close. Stevenson was a great fantasy running back. These last 2 weeks, they've been blown out. So they haven't been able to run with Stevenson, but they're actually favorites because that's how bad the Dolphins are, that the Patriots can actually be favorites in a game, but they're 1.5 points favorites this week. They should be able to keep the game close. As long as the game is close, Stevenson is out on that field producing. So I really like him. I'm with you there. And then my flex play is also a running back. So it's Kyren Williams. There's not a player out there that's getting more work than Kyren Williams in every area, every aspect, the goal line. Like he's just such a safe bet. 8,400. So I spent up a little bit, but still not as pricey as some of those top guys. And then I'll just give you my last running back here. It's Kenneth Walker. I guess I'm chasing those 3 touchdowns from last week, but like I'm not expecting that. And I thought he looked so good, right? And in this Giants game, it's a good matchup. We expect the Seahawks to be able to take an early lead. And then that's our worry with Gino Smith. Do they go to the run game in the second half? And I do believe they're probably going to be doing that. So Kenneth Walker, I love him this week as well. So again, my running backs are Kenneth Walker, Ramondre Stevenson, and then in my flex, I threw in running back Kyren Williams.
I should be like the disclaimer person here and say, Michelle, I have no prior knowledge of creating these lineups before this episode. Because I also have Kenneth Walker in my lineup as my running back here. I do have him. If the price is just too good, and we're not just chasing the Detroit points, we're chasing the Giants points. Yeah. He's going to run all over the Giants, and fully healthy, I think he'll be fine, ready to go. The Seahawks team should crush the Giants at home the way the Giants are looking right now. I thought about stacking with the defense, but I wanted to save a little bit of money for my other running back, which is Brian Robinson Jr. I'm going there this week. Again, I have not been impressed with the Browns defense. It's fallen apart. They allowed a big game with Devin Singletary on the ground. Last week, they were facing the Raiders, and they can't run the ball. It's Amir White or Alexander Madison. Now they get a team that can run the ball. This offensive line for the Commanders, by the way, is playing out of its mind. I mean, you have rookie Brandon Coleman there, but all the additions they made, including Biotic, the center, they're really playing well. This is why this offense is producing really well. So I think Brian Robinson Jr., especially with Austin Eckler, maybe if he concussion, does he come back? How do we feel about Julian Nichols behind him? Robinson should see some good volume. So I do like him at 7,700. So Michelle, that leaves just a tight end in defense. Where are you going this week?
Yeah, I'm going with David Njoku. I think the Browns offense really needs him. I really do. In the short time he played in week 1, he was getting the targets, he was getting production. So I'm going to roll with him at 5,500. He was super cheap, and I do think he has high upside. I mean, the tight ends are gross, right? So I need to pick a guy that I think has a safe floor plus high upside, and that is Njoku. And then for my defense, I'm going with the Broncos against the Raiders because the Broncos defense for fantasy has been fantastic. And now they get a great matchup against the Raiders, who are allowing a ton of points to opposing defenses in fantasy. So great matchup, and you don't have to pay up for them. I was like scrolling down that 4,000. So they're pretty cheap in terms of fantasy defenses for DFS. And I think they should be probably one of the more expensive ones. So I was shocked by that.
Yeah, somehow I went even cheaper than you did with both these positions. So let me start at tight end first. And I know he didn't have a good game last week, or he thought the matchup was good, but it's Cole Kmet. And I look at the Panthers. They haven't given it up to the tight ends. First game, they were kind of ripped by the Saints with Juwan Johnson and Foster Moreau. They did give up a big game to Brock Bowers. Even the Chargers guys got someone involved, not big games, but they don't really throw too much to them. And then last week, I think the Bengals didn't really need to use their tight ends as much, but you still saw like Eric All being used and all that. So I like Cole Kmet quite a bit. I think he's going to be a guy that it's going to be better at home. I just have a good vibe with that. I know he's disappointing last week, but I think this offense is going to go a lot through Kmet and DeAndre Swift this week. I've mentioned it multiple times, but matchup is just too good against the Panthers. So I like Kmet, totally like it at 5,200 as well. Now, the defense, I try to play how low can I go, and I went low to 3,500 and the Washington Commanders. So, again, the other stack I've created here with Robinson and the Commanders, we have Purdy and Samuel. So, do another correlated option here, but I think the Commanders will take control of that game, get some sacks, maybe put Jameis Winston in the game by getting after Deshaun Watson. That's how much I think the Commanders defense is going to start to respond to Dan Quinn. They're at home. I like it. I'm going with it for that cheap price. It afforded me to get all these other guys in my lineup.
Very nice. To just go down my lineup again for y'all. I have Jordan Love at quarterback, Kenneth Walker, Ramondre Stevenson at running back, Jaden Reed, Brian Thomas Jr., and George Pickens as my 3 wide receivers, David Njoku at tight end, and then in my flex, I threw in Kyron Williams, and then my defense, the Broncos.
Yeah, the takeaway is here that there's 2 sets of players we agreed on here. Kenneth Walker, Jaden Reed, Brian Thomas, and Ramondre Stevenson. So I don't know if we can give you any more evidence, but these guys should be a core group that you have in a lot of your FanDuel lineups. And rounding out mine, Brock Purdy as my quarterback, Ryan Robinson as my other running back here, Deebo Samuel stacked with Purdy, Cole Kmet, and the Commanders defense.
Very nice. That is it for today's episode. That's it for our week 5 episodes. We hope you guys all have a great weekend. We will talk to you on Monday. Good luck in your fantasy matchups. Bye, y'all.